This is the third day of the September 1981 7-day sesshin. We will continue reading on the 4 vows and then the 3 refuges, is taken from the chapter on repentance and resolution from the Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, published by the Buddha's Universal Church of San Francisco, translated by the brothers Feng and Feng from the Chinese. The third vow in Wei Nang's formulation, or the formulation of his time, was as to the vow to study the limitless Dharma. This is the necessity to practice constantly the Dharma of seeing into one's self-nature. The seeing being the self-nature. If it is clear and unobstructed by self. Wei Nang continues, this is the meaning of genuine learning. Genuine learning. Not from what was, but from what is, which is changing constantly. Is the seeing changing? Or only what is seen? And is that really changing, or is it always fresh and new? The word change already, in that there's already a comparison with what was. There's no holding on to what was, then what has changed? There's something fresh. That's all one can say. And not fresh as compared to old, then there's comparison. Wei Nang continues, as to the vow to attain the highest Buddhahood, this means that when you can always have your mind under the discipline of the real Dharma, here it says orthodox, we leave this out because we do not know what was the original word. When you can always have your mind under the discipline of the real Dharma, Dharma meaning truth, seeing the truth, which has its own discipline of not being diverted, influenced, or distracted, then one can't see the truth. Then one's views are warped, influenced. When you can always have your mind under the discipline of the real Dharma, letting go of both delusions and awakening, letting go of both delusions and awakening, meaning the idea of awakening, the memory of awakening. The concept of it. And when you have prajna always arising, prajna wisdom, the wisdom of seeing that comes with seeing. When you have prajna always arising, casting off both the real and the unreal, then you will see the Buddha nature, then you will attain Buddhahood at the mere mention of the word. The way to practice these vows is to do it constantly from moment to moment. casting off both the real and the unreal. Fortunately, Wei Nang does not go into what he means by the real and the unreal. Actually, when one uses a word, one must make sure that everyone who hears that word has the same footing with it, understands it in the same way. What's real? Churning intestines and ache in the viscera is real. Headache is real. This is real. Meaning it's there, it's actually there. Sometimes when people have stomach aches, one says, well, it's all in your mind. The stomach ache is real enough, no matter what the cause is, whether it comes from fear, trepidation, anguish, or ambition. What's unreal? You see something, have a hallucination. See somebody standing in front of you brandishing a sword. And there are some 52 people in the room, they don't see it. You touch that space, there's nothing there. Is it real? To you, it's real enough. But if something clarifies inside, that figure may vanish. The thing that's often mentioned in Indian analogy by the Buddha is you go through dark wood and you step over something long and thin and think it's a snake. And you withdraw as fear. Then you take a second look and it was a piece of rope. The idea of the snake, there's still something going on in the mind, biochemically, physiologically, electronically, you name it, which is real. It's actually something is taking place at the moment you think you see a snake, but actually what's lying there is a piece of rope. That's a fact. All the ideas we have, paradise, rebirth, pure land, rose land, lotus land. Are they real? Thought manufactured, thought produced. Thinking is real. It's actually taking place. A very fine line between what's real and actual and unreal. Casting off both the real and the unreal. Who's doing the casting off? A mountain is real. Snow-capped, glowing in the evening sun. There were some group of English philosophers at some time in some century who said that isn't real, that's your thought. Of course there's thought of a mountain, and one can see very clearly when the thought of the mountain gets in the way and one doesn't see the mountain. When there's no thought, no name for this mountain at all, nothing, then there's just what is. And that's not made by thought. The lawnmower is made by thought and what comes from it. But not the mountain. But if one is engrossed in ideas, then one sees the ideas and not the thing itself. Remember once asking for the salt at a dinner table. Please pass the salt. And a little dish was handed and one just took it and ladled out some salt. And all of a sudden, the idea of this being the salt container somehow dropped away. I don't know how it did. And one saw this thing. It was an incredible little thing. A very fine little mosaic of flowers. One had sort of seen it in a blur many times, but it was the salt container. And that hid it. The idea hid the real thing. Here is meaning casting off both the idea of what's real and the idea of what's unreal. Ideas dropping off. Because they're seen for what they are, a straitjacket. But there's already the seeing. How does that come about? One person said, I've been at this thing now for 5 years and I can't see. I can see nothing. Is there an idea that one can see nothing? An idea of what seeing is? One sits at the dinner table, sort of greedily reaching for more food. Can't one see that? This fear of not getting enough? There's really attention, isn't that quite clear? Or anger, when it comes up? Can't one see? A first glimpse of a tree, before the word tree comes up, or the old worries come up about the family. There's nothing magic to seeing. It's only that we're so wound up, bound in, spun in a net of worries, concerns, ideas, goals, that we only see that, or think of that. And it hides what's there all the time. This is why every human being, at one point or another, needs to enter this realm, this state of not knowing. Not trusting any ideas and words. Questioning more, which, as was said this morning in the Zendo, some people weren't here, they were up in the waiting line. This mu or this who is just the very tip of this immense, infinite not knowing. Then you will see the Buddha nature. And most people, when they get a glimpse of it, there's a sense of surprise, amazement, not at beholding 100,000 Buddhas, but seeing things as they are. And just as that general who pursued Wei Nang, he came to a realization, just as his next thought was, is that all? So some people say, is this what I've labored for? But it's not in this sense of wanting more. How stupid I was to think of all these goals and accomplishments. The Buddha himself said, I attained nothing from complete, unexcelled enlightenment. And this is why it is called unexcelled. And in the Prajnaparamita we recite, nor is there wisdom to attain. To attain. It's there. Attainment is emptiness. The idea of attaining something. It's the idea and the yearning, the compulsion to attain something that keeps us in bondage, tied in knots. And we bring this tendency, this conditioning right into the Zendo. There's this famous saying by Yunmen. We quoted him in the opening talk when he was asked, what if the old tree withers and all the leaves drop? What then? What happens? And his response there was the body exposed in the golden wind or in the autumn wind. Exposed. And another time he said, when old Shakyamuni was first born, he pointed to the sky with one hand, to the earth with the other hand, scanned the four directions and said, in the heavens and on earth I alone am the honored one. After this quote, Yunmen goes on, if I had seen him then, I would have struck him dead with one blow, fed him to the dogs, hoping that there would be peace in the world. The Buddha himself, there are supposedly two poems he made at the time of his enlightenment. In Zen texts, the only thing that's usually mentioned is wonder of wonders. All beings have this true self, this true nature, this Buddha nature. All beings are Buddha, but fail to see this because human minds are inverted. So they can't perceive this. But there's this other thing. This other hymn it's called. I don't know why it's called a hymn. Through many diverse births I passed, seeking in vain the builder of the house. In another translation it says the builder of the tent. The house, we can also say the builder of the present. But, O framer of houses, thou art found. Never again shalt thou fashion a house for me. Broken are all thy beams, the king post shattered. This mind has passed into the stillness of nirvana, the ending of desire. Not the uprooting of it, the ending of it, by itself. By seeing the builder of the house. And there's another thing quoted in some old Pali text. All vanquishing, all knowing am I. From all wrong thinking, wholly purged and free. You wonder whether this word I was used or whether this is the translation. All these things, as you've heard, were recorded 200 and 300 years after the Buddha's death. And one knows what happens when things are passed on from one to another. No matter how well-intentioned, sometimes because of too many good intentions, things are added or left out. All vanquishing, all knowing am I, from all wrong thinking, wholly free. All things discarded, root of craving. Another translation, it says, cravings rooted out. All things discarded, root of craving. Whom should I follow? I have found out all. No teacher is mine, no equal. Counterpart to me there's none throughout the whole wide world. And so forth. Some commentator has considered this as a very arrogant poem and said the Buddha really was a very arrogant teacher. He was an arrogant person saying that too. This tent builder, this tent designer, the Buddha described as thirst, desire, craving, wanting, reaching for something that's not right here, which builds one house, one tent, one prison after another. And yet it's possible in a sitting when there's no thought of attaining anything, just questioning. All of a sudden one finds that there's no desire left. One hasn't battled them, one hasn't repressed them. One finds they're not there. Where are they? And an incredible sense of freedom pervades everywhere. Because there's no craving for anything. The first craving that probably rears its ugly head is, where did this state go? I want it back. Just see that instantly. as a shadow, as a division. As a new little house one is trying to build. A house of memory. Ghost house of memory. And to leave it. Leave it crumble. Wei Nang says, now that we have made the 4 great vows, I will instruct you in the formless 3 refuges. The formless 3 refuges. He says that. Maybe what he's trying to say is don't cling to any forms. Don't take refuges in forms. Forms can be ideas, images, or figures, or people. Virtuous and learned counselors, we take refuge in Bodhi, because it is the ultimate of both merit and prajna. He doesn't say as we do, I take my refuge in Buddha. But we take refuge in Bodhi. Bodhi is wakefulness, attention, wisdom, clarity. It's even spelled with a capital B here. Nothing special, nothing awe-inspiring. Maybe Wei Nang knew the pitfall of our craving to be awe-inspired. Because then for a little while this little me is washed over with awe. But it comes back when the wave recedes. Take our refuge in Bodhi, because it is the ultimate of both merit and prajna. Merit, read this from the commentary here in the back. This commentary is, according to the author, the translators, is from original Chinese sources. It doesn't say what the source is, but it's probably the commentary of a master, not of the translators. Merit is not just listed as merit in the glossary, but as merit virtue. And it says, in Buddhist terminology, this has some special implications. Merit virtue implies not only that benevolent actions are done without any expectation of reward, but also the inward merits which pertain to the freeing of one's mind from all attachments, delusions, and erroneous views, back to its original pristine status of clarity and quietude. This is frequently confused, as did Emperor Wu, with wealth virtue. The emperor asked Bodhidharma, what merit have I gained by building all these temples and pagodas, translating sutras, supporting thousands of monks and nuns? I don't know whether under the Emperor Wu some of these enormous, multitudinous carvings were made of Buddha figures. And Bodhidharma replied, no merit whatsoever. Because true merit is freeing oneself from attachment to merit and seeing clearly. The danger of rewards. which is the same as the danger of punishment. Because in that there's influence and manipulation. This is frequently confused, as did Emperor Wu, with wealth virtue. This is the usual performance of good deeds to which are attached some degree of expectation of reward. Since this reward usually is in good fortune, it is called, and now here some characters, to which we shall apply the term karmic virtue, a little bit of a better life. Which is transient. But the most important fact is that there is not an accompanying discipline of the mind in these activities, so they cannot be called merit virtue, which is the point of the patriarch's discussion. We take refuge in Bodhi because it is the ultimate of both merit and prajna. When we recite every morning or in the afternoon for our chanting service, I take my refuge in Buddha, what is going on in your mind? Maybe during a sesshin, nothing, you just recite, you bow. It's an empty recitation, an empty gesture. Or is it? You must ask this question of yourself, so you don't become a robot. So you see whether there's something mechanical, inattentive. One is thinking about something, one is not even aware of a prostration. What is a prostration? Who are you taking refuge in, or what? That carving? The idea behind it? What is the idea behind it? The Buddha? What is the Buddha? Some helpful, supernatural being that will look after you? Protect you, like we recite in that poem at the funeral service? Buddhas and Bodhisattvas protecting sentient beings, are they? Protecting from what? From ignorance? From bombs? From hatred? What is this refuge taking? I wonder. I'm questioning it. Are you? I take my refuge in Buddha. What do I mean when I say that? I say that all the time. Mustn't I think about this at some time? Or do I just do what is done traditionally? Because one doesn't question traditions? Is that forbidden territory? Or does one think it is forbidden territory? Or one thinks nothing, one just does, hoping someday to understand. We take our refuge in Bodhi. Awakening, is that a refuge? Clarity, is that a refuge? If you make it a refuge, it's no longer clarity. Maybe the word refuge is not properly used here. But first, you use it and then you try to kind of explain it away. Sort of modify it or qualify it. a wildlife refuge is where wildlife can freely roam. Except for a few occasional poachers. But they have to have this refuge because they have no refuge anyplace else. Anyplace else, they're fair game. So wildlife needs refuges. So it won't be totally annihilated by human beings. Did the Buddha ask his disciples to take refuge in him? Did he ask his disciples to build statues of him? I don't know. There are thousands and thousands of sutras which have not even been translated. I wonder whether he did. Right after the death of the Buddha, for 200 years, no images were made at all. No graven images, no statues or pictures. At that time, that was sort of taboo. Just like with the Muslims. They still don't have a picture of Allah. You don't do that. That's sacrilege. And then with the expansion of the Alexandrian Empire, Greek artisans came into India. And these Greek artisans loved to make statues. They were wonderful at it. They made beautiful statues. The Buddha at that time looked quite Greek. Didn't have this aquiline nose, but a straight one. And the posture, which was not quite clear to these Greek artisans, was sort of draped over with a lot of drapery. So you don't quite see where the knees end and there are beautiful Buddha statues. Some person told me they're so inspiring. Is this what we need? Inspiration? After looking at an inspiring Buddha figure, coming home, how do you see your wife? Or your child, or husband, or friend, or your boss? Does the inspiration last? Or do old images come up? How you should be treated, how you should not be talked to. Or, well, I don't have to tell you. I remember when early Sesshin, there was a man, he's not at the center any longer. He sat beautifully, had a beautiful face. Seeing him walk by in Kinhin, not keeping one's eyes down, but looking at that man. It was very inspiring. It was really a walking Buddha. And one time he told me he had sat next to a woman during Sesshin, and that woman probably didn't keep her eyes down all the time either. After Sesshin, she told him, "Oh, how inspiring it was to sit next to you. You looked like a living Buddha." And he said, "Where was she? Where were her eyes and her intuition? I was going through hell." My God, the anger and resentments in me. It's amazing. It didn't show in the face at all. Sometimes seeing a person sit no wrinkle in the face, so to say, because there's no resistance. It may do something in perceiving that. I remember this myself from an early sesshin, waiting there where we have our toilets, waiting to get into the kinhin line. Thoughts all over the place. And a woman passed by. And something clicked. Something clicked. Can't call it inspiration. So what did the Buddha say to his disciples when he died? And incidentally, the pictures of the dying Buddha are as young looking as the picture of a young Buddha. Didn't he have any wrinkles? Any rings under his eyes? We always have to idealize. Why? The Buddha said to Ananda, "Therefore, Ananda, be ye lamps unto yourselves. Be ye a refuge to yourselves." Hey, here, he could have said, "Take a refuge in me after I die." He says, "Be ye refuge to yourselves. Betake yourselves to no external refuge. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp. The truth of the matter that one is scared to stand alone. If one sees that scare, that fear, that's the truth of oneself at that instant. Can it be faced? And what happens in such honest facing, in which there's no judgment and no comparison to ideal people who have no fear? Humbug. Fear is really built into the system, or else we would never have survived. We hadn't had this ability to be afraid and run away. Hold fast to the truth as a lamp. Look not for refuge to anyone beside yourselves. And not the image of oneself that one builds up so one has some safety in that image. What is one without all images? And whosoever, Ananda, either now or after I am dead, shall be a lamp unto themselves, shall betake themselves to no external refuge, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and holding fast as their refuge to the truth, shall look not for refuge to anyone beside themselves. It is they, Ananda, among my bhikkhus, who shall reach the very topmost height. But they must be anxious to learn. Is one anxious to learn about oneself from moment to moment? Listening to what is being pointed out or read, and not just swallowing it lock, stock, and barrel, but trying to see into it. Is this so? Can I see this in myself? If you don't, and you just repeat it, then you're just being influenced. But if you see it, then using the same words does not mean that you're influenced. One has to use words. And some people are more original with words than others. The words don't matter, but that one understands what they point to within oneself, which means within all human beings. But they must be anxious to learn. Not anxious to take refuge, but anxious to learn. From moment to moment. We will leave it here for today. Continue tomorrow. The four vows.
All beings without number,
I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gates beyond measure. I vow to penetrate the great way of the Buddha. I vow to attain all beings without number. I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot Dharma gates beyond measure. I vow to penetrate